So we've had a chance to talk about Vice City, some of its faults, a lot of things that we love about it, but when you look at the GTA timeline, it's kind of interesting. It starts all the way back in 1997 with the first GTA. When talking about the 3D PS2 era ones, that starts in 2001, running through 2004. It's at 2008 that we get GTA 4, in 2013 that we get the final GTA game officially in GTA 5. I mean, we've had like 4 different versions of that game at this point, but it does beg the question of when comparing that 3D PS2 era Grand Theft Auto games as opposed to 4 and 5. 4 got a lot of flack when it first came out, but other people loved the fact that it was a lot more realistic. And 5 took the risk of, I mean, Ryan's definitely on that boat. And then 5 is like, hey, we're not going to give you one character. We're not going to give you 2. We're going to give you a trifecta of stories that do somewhat intertwine. And some people love that. Others thought, man, we've gone a long way from the silent character of GTA 3. So we're just going to have that conversation right now. When talking about just one versus the other, starting with Ryan, it's like, which boat are you on? Are you PS2, 3D era GTA, or are you more on the high definition 4 and forward GTA?
It's really tough, but I would lean towards the 3D era.
I was gonna say 8-bit. I mean, hey, we could go back to like
I was about to say HD, but I meant 3D. So the GTA 3. Vice City, San Andreas, and even the PSP games which were ported to PS2, because it's a very well interconnected story, and the characters I think are a lot more memorable. Don't get me wrong, I love me some Nico Bellic from GTA 4, but at the end of the day, people remember Tommy Vercetti, people remember CJ, people remember Big Smoke, you remember Diaz.
Yeah.
It's like those are the characters we all know. We know even Salvatore Leone, who's in San Andreas and he's in GTA 3. There's so many of those characters that we really got to know throughout those games. Whereas GTA 4 and GTA 5, there were some like crossover characters, but I actually never even realized it. So I played through GTA 4 twice, and then I played GTA 5 when it came out. And then like about 2 weeks ago, I found out that there were actually characters from GTA 4 that appeared in GTA 5.
Ryan, because if it makes you feel better, I found out about that right now.
Yeah.
Same here.
Yeah, I'm like, hey, I learned something.
When Ken Rosenberg showed up in San Andreas, you were like, oh shit, it's Ken Rosenberg. You know what I mean? Like, you actually remembered the character. And same with Salvatore from GTA 3 showing up in San Andreas. And yeah, they just had this like star-studded cast.
I'm sorry. I'm just completely blown away by the concept of you going, oh shit, it's Ken Rosenberg.
Most people are like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Like that's the one you mark out for?
Well, that was,
Ken Rosenberg.
It was, hey. It's
part of it.
Yeah, he's a lawyer, man.
Yeah. And Keith, in your case, when thinking about one versus the other, which boat are you on?
I lean towards the 3D games as well, but I think it's mostly because like that's the games that I grew up with. Like when I was growing up, I played the heck out of 3, I played the heck out of Vice City, the heck out of San Andreas. Didn't really touch the PSP games too much if we're lumping that in there, but 4 is a game that I actively bounced off of. Like, it's the only Grand Theft Auto game I never beat, and unless we do it for this podcast, I have no intention of doing so. And 5,
right, like, that right.
I played through 5 when it came out on the first generation that it came out on, and I enjoyed my time with it. I have my gripes with it, but it just didn't feel the same for me, because I loved these PS2 era Grand Theft Auto games so much, and I just didn't feel the same way about the HD era. And I think if I had to pinpoint it, I would guess that it's because, especially in 4, they really tried to dial up the realness aspect of it. Like, they tried to ground it more, and I feel like saying grounded is a weird thing for the Grand Theft Auto franchise, but they tried to make it more lifelike. And part of the reason why I like Vice City so much is because it's so absurd and crazy and insane, and they kind of took all of that away, especially in 4, brought it a little back in 5, but in ways that I wasn't the biggest fan of, and it was just kind of soulless at that point. So yeah, I'm going to lead towards the 3D ones for that reason.
And I mean, think about the fact that GTA 4 came out in 2008, and we've said this a lot in the podcast, where that 2006, 2008 period in gaming is like, gaming can be realistic, especially when we switched to like HD. You saw that color palette drastically go down. I mean, just look at any image of even GTA 3, which is not a beautiful game. It's kind of dull looking compared to 4, and 4 feels like it's got this filter of just like brown, dark brown, black.
Yeah.
It's like this very dull looking thing when you go from like the PS2 era with like, you know, you're going to like a Miami type setting with Vice City. You go to San Andreas and that 90s vibe and feel.
See,
the other ones felt a lot more dull for me. Not so much 5. 5 did bring that back.
I don't know if I can fault GTA 4 for that, because you're not wrong. You're not wrong at all about that. But there's also the other side of the conversation where they were going for the New York City vibe with Liberty City. And if you've been to New York, it is very much a gray, dull city. And that might have ended up being a cop-out so they could lean on that. But it's almost like they do too good of a job at that.
And I think something that, at least for me, and I'd love to get, you know, Ryan's take first on this, which is something that was a big deal with GTA 4 was, hey, you can go outside of buildings and there's no loading screen. And now that seems like I mean, that's still a thing now with the switch to like PS5 and no load times and all that. But I'm like, okay, that's cool. That is not in my list of priorities in games. I want to have a ridiculous fun time. This realism thing, this is not GTA. Like, for that, I will play anything else. Some people love that, right? Some people thought that GTA maybe went a little bit too up high. We just played Vice City. It's like, it's outrageous. You're jumping from freaking building to building. But it's Grand Theft Auto. It's not a reboot, right? It's GTA 4. It is in the name. I feel like a lot of people, myself included, dropped off. Like, I didn't beat GTA 4 because I got bored. And much like Keith, maybe I would play this game now and think very differently of it. I loved a lot of the characters, but where I was playing, and look, I love New York. I've traveled to New York like 7, 8 times. I wouldn't live there, but I would travel there every year if I could. Yet GTA 4 did not give me that vibe. In your case, Ryan, it's like, what did you think of those switches to like, hey, now you have the phone in the corner. Now you can have relationships, whereas the PS2 era games were a lot more superficial in that aspect.
I think the HD era, definitely with GTA 4, they were going for a grittier crime story, and they really wanted to, like, San Andreas had all the bells and whistles, and it was all about screwing around and having fun. And I do like that, but at the end of the day, for me, the campaign is what I enjoy, or the story is what I enjoy most about Grand Theft Auto games, because you can screw around, you can enter cheats, but I feel like after 30 minutes, you're kind of over it, and it's just empty if there's no actual missions and things to achieve, you know? But yeah, so GTA 4 comes out, and they take away a lot of the bells and whistles because they want to build a new foundation. And their idea is to make a world feel even more living and breathing, with, like, you could literally follow an NPC around all day in that game, and they would go grab a burger, they would get in a car, they would drive away. Like, they would actually do things. You could, if the police arrested someone, you could literally follow the police all the way to take them and put them away in a jail cell. Like, they focused on the little details. The cars drove more realistic, which a lot of people didn't like. The guns felt more realistic, which a lot of people didn't like. But I appreciated it was a smaller but very detailed world with a very gritty story that I really got sucked into. And I understand for the people that just want to fly a plane and then go skydiving and land on top of a mountain and then go ride a bike off the mountain. I get it that it didn't have all that stuff that people like about those games, but I do think GTA 4 has the best story of any Grand Theft Auto game. And I know there's characters, like I said, that are more memorable from other games, but if we were to just look at the story and how it all threads together, I actually think GTA 4 has the best story of any game. GTA 5, not so much. I'm not as big on that. Of course, they added a lot more of those bells and whistles back into the game that they didn't have in 4. But I never felt as attached to any of those characters. I didn't really care. It took me a while to get through the story because I kind of like quit halfway through for like 6 months and then like came back to it later just to finish it off. And yeah, I wasn't big on like, oh, you had one cool heist mission in GTA 4 and then they were kind of like, well, let's make the whole game about heist missions in GTA 5. And that just wasn't as big to me.
And then they took that all on and the world was never the same.
Yeah, and see, I love that about GTA 5, and I think that's most of the reason why I look at that game fondly, because the character development in that game is kind of whatever. Like, you can cherry pick a couple of good characters out of that game, shout out to Lamar, and really just like you can talk about how great they were, but overall I think it was a bit of a subpar experience. But when you talk about the heists in that game, like, I loved that aspect of it, the setup, the building towards it, and then planning what you wanted to do and how much money you were going to get if you wanted to skimp out on this part. Like, I thought that gameplay loop was awesome, and it was enough to propel me through that game. And based off of that, I feel like I need to take a sidebar right now and say, I know there is at least one person screaming at their phone or computer or whatever you're listening to us on. Thank you for listening, by the way.
Yeah.
Saying that all of this camp that I am talking about that I love and all of these heists, they are a thing that exists in the HD era. It just exists in the form of Grand Theft Auto Online, and I know I would love it. I just haven't touched it yet. I just wanted to address that.
Yeah,
well,
it's
you
like,
gotta
hey,
start buying
there's a
those
lot of
shark
that.
cards. Buy more shark cards.
Just get that money in there.
Buy
and
shark cards.
Do
Buy
the crazy, insane
All
heists
the
where
monies.
you get an underground molten base or wherever the hell they're doing it these days.
And look, Ryan mentioned...
the online's cool from what I've seen of it, and I'm sure I would love it if I got into it, but I don't want to buy shark cards.
And look, some people have made a freaking career out of like role-playing and online and all that. Ryan brought up shark cards, and just like
buy shark cards.
I mean, you got to get that. I mean, from a curiosity perspective, when talking about sales data, I mean, this is just, I don't know if you guys saw the document that I wrote on the second part here, but from the first GTA all the way till 5, first of all, I mean, GTA 5, easily the highest selling. GTA 1, 3 million. GTA 2, 2 million. GTA 3, 14.5 million. Vice City, 12.7 million. Which is interesting. A slight of a credit to fandom.com for all this info. San Andreas, 21.5. GTA 4, how much do you think GTA 4 did as much above or below San Andreas?
I'm
definitely
looking at
below.
the document. I can't answer this.
Okay,
I'm
right.
saying, hold on, can I guess?
Yeah.
I'm going to say it sold 9 million copies.
I mean, talking about sales data, how much money do you think it made?
Oh, man. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. It made 9 million.
No, 25 million. I mean, you're way off.
Oh,
there.
25.
Yeah.
So
And
wait,
then,
what was San Andreas?
21.5.
Oh, so it did better than
Yeah,
San
it did
Andreas.
better.
Wow.
And now, how much money do you think, as of this year, GTA 5 has made so far?
I'm going to say like 700 million.
400 trillion. No. $140 million.
And that's why we haven't gotten
1-4-0.
GTA 6,
That's
folks.
total grossing, right? Like all the shark cards and everything.
Like, they refer
Okay.
to sales data. So I am assuming that actually doesn't count for that. I think this is, based on the numbers that I'm seeing, this is only for copies sold. So this is not counting the online stuff. So
Well,
needless to say,
let's say like 30 million people bought it originally, and then like 5 million of those people bought the game like 4 more times over the course of the last 10 years.
Exactly. It almost feels like you have to add up all of the PS2 games to be a fair shake against GTA 5, even though it wouldn't exceed it still, but because it's been released on 3 generations.
Yeah. I don't even like the game that much, and I've bought it twice, and I feel terrible about it.
I have a sealed copy for PS4 because Amazon just like gave it to me one year. So I have a version for PS3. I have another one for PS4. I have a sealed copy for PS4. So I have 3 copies of the game.
That, baby.
Plus I have it on PC.
You get that factory sealed game.
Oh yeah, CIB sealed. So I didn't want to have, just like as his last chapter in this episode here, I didn't just want to have like the default favorite, least favorite conversation. The 3 of us agree, like, for better or worse, the PS2 3D era GTAs are our favorite. When we look at the sales data, that's different from our taste. So if we were to speculate as gamers, as lovers of this series, GTA 6, if you were to say, well, sprinkle a little bit of Vice City, maybe with some of this and some of that, like, where would you like 6 to take place in, right? We've gone through the 80s, through the 90s, Liberty City, back and back again and back again. We've gone back to Liberty City a lot of time. When you look at all this, it's like, can you pick 2 GTA games? You were like, if you fuse these 2 together, this would be the ideal GTA game for me. What would that be for you guys?
Do I have to
GTA,
pick?
man.
Do I have to pick a Grand Theft Auto game? Because my answer doesn't involve a Grand Theft Auto.
Is it
game.
Red Dead?
Yes, I would like Vice City and Red Dead. No.
What if we take Grand Theft Auto and put it in the Wild West?
Yeah,
Huh?
what if instead of cars, hear me out here, you had horses?
Dude!
Yeah.
Wow.
You know how those cars have horsepower? What if you had horsepower?
Powerful horses.
Yeah, huh? You picking up what I'm putting down here?
Wow.
No, if I could pick my ideal Grand Theft Auto game, I mean, first of all, I think realistically, Grand Theft Auto 6 is not going to have a single player aspect, because why would they waste the time and money on that?
Oh, don't
But-
say
Don't
that.
say
Don't
it.
say that.
If-
That hurt. That actually hurt. It makes all the sense in the world. I get it. It still hurts.
Yeah, I know. Welcome to the cold, harsh realities of business. But if I were to have my perfect game and it had this single player, honestly, I would just want them to take the concepts of Vice City and put it in Saints Row 4. Just make it super realistic, future crime, computer technology, insane guns and laser beams with superpowers. Like, do that, but make like a fun, gritty crime story out of it. And that would be my ideal GTA game.
Damn.
GTA 6, I do feel like Vice City makes sense for them to revisit. It feels like it has to be the 80s again, because I just don't know how interesting I don't know how interesting Miami is outside of the 80s for like a full game. I mean, they could do it, or they could do, you know, a broader Florida. Obviously, it doesn't have to be just like the Miami-based Vice City, but in the HD era, we've already visited Liberty City and San Andreas, so it naturally makes sense. The only place we haven't gone back to is Vice City, so I do feel like if GTA 6 is ever to happen, we don't even know if it's in development, which is very depressing, then it seems like Vice City's the way to go. And I mean, if we look at the amount of detail that they put into Red Dead 2, it's like the amount that they could do with that game it's very interesting, especially with a whole new generation of consoles. I mean, for God's sakes, we had an entire generation of consoles that did not get a new GTA game, and the PS2 got so many GTA games, you know?
We got
like
5, right? Yeah, 5.
Yeah. We got 5, and then the PS3 era got 2. and then literally 0. So I don't know. It's
and then
disappointing.
We'll get GTA 6, and then on the PlayStation 8, we'll also get GTA 6.
What if we get GTA 5 too?
Yeah, it's just like, it's depressing because with seeing Red Dead 2 and the amount of detail in that game and the amount of talent that is in Rockstar, to think with a Series X PS5 era what they are capable of, it's like I want a new single player GTA. You know, it's all there.
Honestly, though, when you say the words Red Dead 2 and what they could do with a Grand Theft Auto, it makes
Horse
me
testicles.
want that game significantly less. Like, horse testicles aside, I was not a giant fan of these ways that they slowed down Red Dead 2 for quote-unquote realism. And that, thinking about that in another single-player game that, well, you just have cars instead of horses with testicles, I'm not a big fan of that, because it seems like that would take the parts that I hate about 4.
I'm just talking about the detail in the world, right? I think there's problems with Red Dead 2's mission structure, and I think a lot of the missions got way too linear. We talked about choices in GTA games previously. I think the choice in missions has slowly kind of gone away, and they've gotten more scripted and more cinematic. So I'd like for the detailed world of like a Red Dead 2 style, but more of a little bit of the older school philosophy on the mission structure for Grand Theft Auto.
I think that would be great, because if you did it in the 80s, I think it would force them to be a little bit more outrageous, because Vice City, it's like it is inspired by the 80s, where, you know, in the main review of Vice City, Ryan, you mentioned that, look, like, not all of Florida is the way that Vice City presents it. Vice City presents you what you think, right? Like the concept, like the
That's
extract.
Tony Montana's Florida.
Exactly. And I think if they took that essence of like, hey, what if we do what people think of the 80s as the 80s, right? It's like from the soundtrack to the mission. And I mean, the same way that Keith was not a big fan of, like, I didn't play Red Dead Redemption 2, but it's because all the things that people said were great about it. I'm like, man, that is like the most anti-Juan thing. Like, I don't need that level of realism. Now, if the game looks beautiful, super bright, vivid, the technology's there. I think we are in the generation where this really could happen. I think that's from like, man, I would love to see that, because the 90s, I think, would be a cool concept. I think if you went further back, I mean, GTA, you know, going back to like GTA London or something like that, right? Like the older games have tackled other time periods. I think the 70s would be neat. It would be interesting, but I don't think it would be like a mainstream appeal, where I think the 80s is super relevant now. I mean, think of like synth wave, you know, think of like what's really cool and hip and poppin' in the, like all these old outdated terms. It's like all these gnarly things that are happening that are totally rad, man, and are happening on Twitch and YouTube. Like, I really do think that will be awesome. But the final and painful question that Keith kind of said his take, Ryan. Are we going to get GTA 6, Ryan?
I think we will. I really do think we will. But I'm guessing like 2024 or something like that. Maybe, if we're lucky. Because, I mean, it took a long time for them to make Red Dead 2. I'm not saying it's the same team or anything, but we haven't even gotten like an announcement or a teaser or anything. So, yeah, it seems like if it's happening, it's really far away, because seems like a lot of the resources are on GTA Online, because that's where the money is. I can't say I blame them, but it's just as a fan of single player.
So far away.
I will be shocked if the next Grand Theft Auto game is not just called Grand Theft Auto Online.
No,
I knew he was going to say it.
I knew it.
6 will never exist. It'll just be the Grand Theft Auto Online, the game.
Yep. No GTA 6, no Elder Scrolls 6. They're happy to just milk those two games for forever.
Skyrim coming up for your toothbrush pretty soon.
Yeah, what if they do Grand Theft Auto Skyrim? Boom! Best game ever. Yeah. They do some kind of collab thing between the two companies and all that.
Theft Auto. Morrow City.
And before this just gets horribly off rails, for those on the podcast feed, thank you for listening to The Complete Thing. For those on YouTube, we do publish all of this in an extended format on podcast apps, so you can check this out on Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, Apple Podcasts, all that good stuff. You can drop that 5-star review over there. And for those on YouTube, seriously, thank you so much for checking out our episodes. We continue to just talk about the things that we like. We love doing this podcast because it's not necessarily about stuff that's time sensitive. Like, we're sitting here speculating about GTA 6, and who knows, maybe by the time we publish this, wouldn't be the first time we speculate on something, then literally the day after something gets announced. But
we're willing
I
it
don't
into
think that's going to happen
existence here, folks.
I mean, that could be a part of a thing. So make sure to subscribe. Follow us on Twitter, twitter.com/acastofthepast. We post clips over there, so that's another way that you can support the podcast. So up until next time, this has been another, not exciting for the second part. It's very sad, depressing, but the Vice City was fun edition of A Cast
to the
Past.
Okay, real talk. Are we ever going to... The three of us have basically not played GTA. I played like 10 minutes of GTA Online. I feel like we should eventually play it for enough time to actually be like, hey, here's these three old dudes. What?
We can do it on Twitch. I have a Twitch channel.
We can try it just to be like, hey.
I haven't played it since it was on PS3 though, and they just shut that down, I think.
Yeah, they're shutting it down in December. But that's the thing. It's like it is not like I played it around that time then, and I've seen videos. It's like, oh, things have changed.
It's a different world.
Hey, thanks for checking out the video. If you liked it, please consider subscribing, and we are also available on podcast feeds. So search the name, click on the Sword and Stone, and enjoy a brand new episode every single Sunday.